Welcome back, focused learners. Okay, so today we're diving into something pretty much every single one of us deals with, and we're going to unpack some of the most persistent, guilt-inducing myths out there about how we sit, stand, and just generally exist in our physical bodies. If you've ever felt that nagging pain in your neck while working, only to instantly judge yourself for not sitting up perfectly straight, well, this explainer is going to completely change how you view your body and your daily habits. Let's learn about this together.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for this explainer. First up, the perfect posture myth. Then, the anatomy of muscle imbalances, followed by ergonomics and posture aids. After that, the dynamic movement solution, and finally, rewiring your posture habits.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the perfect posture myth, deconstructing the straight back.
So let's do a quick reality check on all that deep cultural programming we've absorbed. You know the drill. Since we were kids, parents, teachers, everyone's been telling us, stop slouching, put your shoulders back, right? We're conditioned to treat any little deviation from a perfectly rigid, straight back as this massive structural flaw. But think about this for a second. Is perfect posture actually the thing causing your back pain? Seriously, have you ever caught yourself slouching, violently yanked your shoulders back into that perfect military posture, only to realize your back actually hurt more after holding it there for 10 minutes? Well, that cognitive dissonance you're feeling? It's incredibly validating because science completely backs you up on this.
Turns out that perfect straight back we were all taught is actually based on a 19th century static ideal. Get this, way back in 1836, the Weber brothers created this plumb line model. They were trying to define an ideal posture that supposedly required absolutely zero muscular effort. Essentially, they wanted the body to be a static architectural column. But modern clinical biomechanics, it completely rejects that idea. The modern dynamic model proves that the human body isn't some frozen statue. It's a highly dynamic system that constantly needs muscular coordination, balance, and, well, movement.
And that brings us to a really crucial modern rehabilitation maxim. The best posture is your next posture. You see, the problem is that holding any single rigid position for too long, yes, even that supposed perfect posture with your shoulders pinned back, literally forces your tiny micro-stabilizing muscles into localized fatigue. And when those little muscles get completely exhausted, your central nervous system reads that effort as a threat and fires off a protective pain response. So pain doesn't always mean you've damaged tissue. Honestly, a lot of the time, it just means you stop moving.
Still need proof that staying completely still is the enemy? Well, biomechanical data shows that sitting upright actually puts 40% greater compressive force on your L4 and L5 lumbar vertebrae compared to upright standing. That's a massive difference, and it totally shatters the myth that there's this one singular pain-free magic pose you should lock yourself into all day long.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of Muscle Imbalances, the real drivers of pain.
So, if a lack of perfect posture isn't what's causing your pain, what actually is? Well, to figure that out, we look at the brilliant work of neurologist Vladimir Janda. He figured out exactly how our central nervous system responds to structural stress. Janda discovered this incredibly predictable biological division. Basically, our muscles react to prolonged stress in one of two ways. You have your tonic muscles. Those are your slow-twitch endurance muscles, and they respond to stress by getting super tight, hypertonic, and physically shortening up. Then you have your phasic muscles, your powerful, fast-twitch dynamic muscles. They do the exact opposite. They get neurologically inhibited and just kind of give out entirely, becoming weak. This fascinating, totally predictable pattern explains exactly why your neck always feels like a tightly coiled spring, while your mid-back feels weirdly weak and fatigued.
And this exact dynamic leads to a very specific and, let's be honest, highly relatable condition called upper crossed syndrome. It's a biomechanical imbalance where tight dorsal and ventral muscles cross paths with weak deep cervical and mid-back muscles. Let's ground this in reality for a second. This is that classic forward head posture you naturally drift into while you're doom scrolling on your phone or leaning way too close to your computer screen. Your chest and upper neck muscles get extremely tight, while the deep stabilizing muscles of your neck and mid-back basically just throw in the towel and weaken.
Now, the exact same thing happens in your lower half. This is known as lower cross syndrome. It's totally driven by our modern desk-bound lifestyles, where we essentially fuse with our office chairs for 8 hours a day. Your hip flexors and lower back get incredibly tight, and those cross with severely weakened abs and glutes. The end result? A really exaggerated curve in your lower spine and an anterior pelvic tilt. Basically, your pelvis dumps forward, which creates this intense shear force right on your lower back. Hello, chronic pain. It's a totally exhausting reality of sitting all day. But hey, understanding the mechanics is the absolute first step to actually feeling better.
All right, Section 3, Ergonomics and Posture Aids, Modifying the Physical Environment.
Okay, we've looked at the internal anatomy of our pain, so let's shift gears to the external stuff, the tools and environmental setups we instinctively grab when we're desperately trying to fix it. I'm sure you've seen those ads for posture correctors, right? The little straps that forcefully pull your shoulders back. Well, there's a huge clinical debate going on about these wearables. On one hand, sure, they offer great short-term proprioceptive feedback. They act as a handy physical reminder for your nervous system to wake up and engage. But there's a really severe long-term risk here. If you wear a rigid brace for more than 1 or 2 hours a day, the brace actually starts doing the heavy lifting that your muscles should be doing. The result is localized muscle atrophy. You literally end up weakening the exact muscles you were trying to train in the first place. Crazy, right?
So instead of relying on passive bracing, what we actually need is active environmental engineering. And following workstation standards from places like OSHA and the NIH brilliantly illustrates this. Setting up a neutral body position in your workspace actively minimizes the load on those stabilizing muscles. We're talking about keeping your monitor at or slightly below eye level, around 20 to 30 inches away. It means keeping those elbows bent at 90 to 120 degrees and making sure your knees are comfortably at hip height with your feet flat on the floor. Oh, and definitely add in the 20-20-20 rule. Every 20 minutes, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds to prevent eye strain. And remember, regularly shift through dynamic reference postures, upright, standing, reclined. By setting things up this way, you're actively preventing upper and lower cross syndromes from ever taking root.
Which brings us nicely to Section 4, the dynamic movement solution, from biomechanisms to action.
But let's be real. What if you already have these imbalances? Like, how do clinicians actually treat these deeply ingrained postural habits? Well, the absolutely crucial point here is that you cannot just jump straight into lifting heavy weights to fix it. Clinicians actually use this highly elegant 4-phase protocol. First, soft tissue release. Second, targeted stretching. Third, articular mobilization. And only then, fourth, neuromuscular strengthening. Why in that exact order? It comes down to something called reciprocal inhibition. You physically cannot strengthen a weak muscle until you've released and stretched the tight, hypertonic muscle that is aggressively pulling against it.
And beyond standard physical therapy, there's some incredible research out there on somatic movement re-education. Practices like the Alexander technique, the Feldenkrais method, and Pilates. These are mind-body interventions that don't just focus on aggressively building up raw muscle mass. Instead, they focus on retraining your central nervous system's actual motor control patterns. They literally teach your brain how to consciously inhibit unnecessary muscular effort, so you can start moving smoothly, naturally, and efficiently again.
Finally, Section 5, Rewiring Your Posture Habits, the Neuroscience of Change.
All right, so you know the biomechanics now, you know the ergonomics, and you know the clinical protocols. But let's be honest, just knowing isn't enough. We have to face the fact that sheer willpower alone simply cannot override procedural memory and deeply established neural pathways. When you first try to sit differently, your prefrontal cortex is working in overdrive, consciously deciding to move. But as you repeat a behavior in the same context, control shifts deep into the brain, specifically to the basal ganglia, via the habit loop. That's the sequence of cue, routine, and reward. This automation is actually driven by predictive dopamine firing and shifting levels of the KCC2 protein. Your brain is literally hard encoding the habit so you don't have to spend precious energy thinking about it anymore. And that is exactly why, the second you sit in your familiar office chair, your brain automatically triggers your classic slouching routine, completely bypassing whatever willpower you thought you had.
So, the golden question: how long does it actually take to overwrite that deeply embedded neural code? Research shows it takes an average of 66 days to form a new automatic behavioral habit. Honestly, this should provide you with immense scientific relief. You don't need to be perfectly straight and instantly fixed today. Consistency over the next 2 months is the actual biological goal.
And to successfully get through those 66 days, you really need to lean into the behavioral science of atomic habits, specifically the 1% marginal gains concept. Making tiny 1% improvements in your movement variety, like I'm talking about just doing one single small stretch a day, prevents all that cognitive resistance and physical exhaustion that comes from trying to perfectly overhaul your entire posture all at once.
One of the absolute best ways to make those tiny gains stick is a brilliant formula from Stanford's B.J. Fogg called habit stacking. The rule is super simple. After I do a current habit, I will do a new habit. You literally just stack your new postural routine immediately onto an existing, already deeply wired neural pathway. For example, after I pour my morning coffee, I will do a 30-second chest stretch.
You see, you don't even need willpower to remember. The act of pouring the coffee literally becomes the neurological trigger for the stretch.
And finally, we have context manipulation and friction design. The absolute easiest way to break an old bad habit is to alter your physical environment to create friction. Think about it like this. If you have a sit-stand desk, just leave it in the standing position when you log off for the night. The next morning, the physical friction required to press the button and lower the desk actually intercepts your automatic habit of just plopping down into your chair. You are manipulating the context to set your future self up for massive success.
So we've busted the myths, we've broken down the anatomy, we've explored the movement solutions, and we've mapped out the neuroscience of habits. I want to leave you with a highly impactful question to consider right now. What is the one physical trigger you will change in your workspace today? Seriously, don't try to fix everything at once. Pick one single cue, make a 1% change, and just let the neuroscience do the rest. Keep moving, stay dynamic, and we'll see you on the next explainer.